Time to face the music about Stephanie White's absolute momentum killer of a half-court scheme. A sluggish, grinding strategy where offensive possessions simply go to fade away into nothingness. That distinct tactical shadow cast by Stephanie White loomed incredibly large over this evening's matchup. Seriously, Kara Lawson, you unleashed Caitlin Clark's fast-paced brilliance just 24 hours ago, but not this time. Absolutely not. The invisible leash was pulled tight, forbidding her from flying end to end, completely shutting down any chance of a repeat 17-point, 12-rebound masterpiece. Heaven forbid anyone else on the roster feels overshadowed. Oh boy, the underlying motives are glaring. The United States national squad just crushed Puerto Rico by 40 solid points, yet miraculously, that blowout triumph triggered far more public outrage than an actual defeat ever could. Caitlin Clark was restricted to a mere 18 minutes on the hardwood, scraping together 8 points and a pair of assists. Every single choice coming from the sidelines left the viewing audience completely and utterly baffled. Meanwhile, the sheer fury echoing across online communities speaks volumes, painting a much clearer picture than those deceptive final statistics ever will. Drop your rawest truths down below. Was benching Clark at tip-off and capping her court time at a brief 18 minutes against the Puerto Rican squad an actual basketball tactic? Or is there some darker, unsaid narrative driving this bizarre scenario? The loyal supporters have already reached their own bitter conclusions, and the mathematical breakdowns are doing the leadership brass zero favors right now. Taking a closer look, they walked away with a 91-48 victory. The island nation definitely provided a stiffer test than the Senegalese roster did. Still, Caitlin Clark was held to just 18 minutes of action, logging 8 points, 2 helpers, and 3 boards. Good heavens, the relentless and agonizing rotation shuffles were enough to make your head spin. There is absolutely zero logical justification on this earth for keeping a generational talent like Caitlin Clark out of that opening 5. We desperately need to dissect this Puerto Rican showdown because the final tally screams victory, while the underlying atmosphere screams absolute disaster. The American women demolished their opponents 91-48, cruising to a 43-point margin. If you only look at the documents, it appears to be a total masterclass in basketball. Judging solely by the ink, it projects the image of a well-oiled machine executing flawlessly against outmatched qualifier opponents. Hand those post-game stats to a blind observer, and they would instantly declare it a massive, triumphant evening. But subject yourself to the live footage, and your soul will feel an entirely different, sickening reality. Some individuals shined, correct? Kelsey found her shooting rhythm beautifully from start to finish. Goodness, even Angel put together a respectable, gritty outing, knocking down 60% of her attempts from the floor, snagging 13 crucial rebounds in the process. Truthfully, there were brilliant flashes of individual greatness scattered throughout the contest, undeniably so. Jackie Young looked sharp and capable out there. Our towering forces in the paint, Mo and Kiki, handled their business with pure aggression, and the rotational defensive support was rock solid. Intimidating rejections echoed near the rim. We snatched passing lanes, relentlessly harassed the ball handlers, and brought immense defensive pressure. Massive respect to that end of the floor. However, the scoring attack was an absolute tragedy, a confusing, utterly broken system that left everyone scratching their heads in disbelief. It felt as though the coaching staff witnessed the soaring magic of the previous afternoon and maliciously decided, hey, let us cripple our own flow today. Let us drag this into the mud and pray we somehow survive with a win. That blistering critique comes straight from the mouths of numerous exhausted spectators who forced themselves to endure every grueling second. It stands as one of the most visually revolting displays of basketball that a fiercely gifted American squad has ever inflicted upon the hardwood against this caliber of rivalry. We witnessed a lethargic, fractured scheme that trapped the Rock in endless, suffocating corners rather than feeding wide-open snipers. The tempo was a stark, horrifying contrast to that breathtaking second period against the Senegalese, back when the synergy felt downright magical. Void of any pulse or vitality, this 43-point annihilation miraculously left the entire global audience seething with rage rather than celebrating. Trapped right in the eye of this chaotic storm was Caitlin Clark, relegated to a meager 18 minutes as a reserve. She tallied 8 points, 2 dimes, and 3 rebounds, starved of the ball and deprived of any real chance to shine. She appeared, in the eyes of countless critics, completely out of sync, a victim of a disjointed environment where bizarre, senseless substitutions repeatedly shattered any hope of establishing a rhythm. So much for showcasing beautiful, fluid hoops. Truth be told, it genuinely appeared as if the entire offensive scheme was actively fleeing from Caitlin's presence on the floor. There seemed to be a deliberate refusal to let her command the floor general spot. She was treated almost like a ghost drifting aimlessly outside the game plan. It was agonizing to witness, which naturally forces me to scream into the void. Following yesterday's absolute masterclass, the obvious move was to insert Caitlin into the starting five and treat the world to that lethal Caitlin and Paige dynamic that torched the Nets previously. Just hold those 18 minutes and 8 meager points up against her eruption during the Senegal clash, where she exploded off the pine for 17 points, dished out 12 assists, and recorded an earth-shattering plus 35 rating. Remember when Kara Lawson herself sat before the media microphones during the aftermath and explicitly praised the Clark-led rotation as the magical spark plug that ignited the scoreboard and generated the most mesmerizing tempo of the entire evening? Remember when the head coach openly declared that the opening five and substitute patterns would evolve as she hunted for the ultimate, unstoppable chemistry? Well, the roster absolutely shifted heading into the second chapter of this tournament. Yet it swerved wildly away from what the blazing statistics demanded. You ride the euphoric high of that opening demolition of the Senegalese, only to crash into a brutally agonizing spectacle that dragged from the very first tip-off. Sure, Paige Buchers apparently carried the scoring load and delivered a fundamentally sound performance, but the overall vibe felt incredibly, dreadfully hollow. To truly understand the grueling nature of this matchup, look no further than that opening basket, where Paige fought tooth and nail to secure a brutal, hard-earned score. Watch how Kelsey Plum sliced through the baseline before firing a pass out to Buchers, who threw a slick pump fake to force her way into the paint, only for disaster to strike momentarily, as defenders swarmed and knocked the rock loose. Yet she miraculously wrangled it back, muscling a shot over the opposition, a stark reminder of the sheer physical and skill supremacy Team USA holds over squads like Puerto Rico, especially with Buchers commanding the floor as the starting point guard. No soul on earth would ever dare question Buchers' incredible gifts on the hardwood. Racking up 16 points alongside 3 assists, she carved out an objectively respectable stat block, but the actual on-court product surrounding her devolved into a sluggish, agonizing half-court slog that somehow transformed a 43-point blowout into an absolute chore for viewers to endure. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark, the absolute spark plug, who single-handedly ignited the offense and elevated her teammates during the Senegal clash, found herself parked on the sideline, forced to spectate during a contest meant to establish crucial rhythm before facing elite international juggernauts. Curiously, USA Basketball kept their starting five a closely guarded secret right up until the opening jump ball, offering absolutely zero breathing room for the public to digest or debate the choices, by dropping the roster at the exact second the referee tossed the ball into the air. When you remember the intense inferno of outrage sparked by the early release of the Game 1 roster, which notably excluded Clark, this late-release strategy smells incredibly suspicious, seemingly orchestrated to dodge an impending tsunami of pre-tip-off fury regarding their rotational choices. By throwing the news out there while eyeballs were already glued to the broadcast, they effectively eliminated the window for any pre-game internet riots. Make no mistake, dropping information like that is far from an innocent public relations move. It was a calculated, preemptive strike of damage control, and it failed spectacularly because the abysmal quality of play triggered an uproar vastly more deafening than any early tweet could have ever caused. We must dive straight into the Stephanie White parallels flooding social media, as they perfectly capture the profound agony fans feel over this highly restrictive style of play. Coach White, during her tenure commanding the Indiana Fever, stubbornly employed a stagnant half-court scheme that practically handcuffed her star rookie, completely failing to maximize Clark's lethal skill set. Everything that makes Clark a generational terror relies on blistering speed, fast-break chaos, and lightning-strike decision-making before any defense can even dream of establishing a wall. Drag the tempo through the mud, force her into rigid, predetermined half-court sets, and her extraordinary court vision vanishes entirely, suffocated by an offensive framework that refuses to let her operate in open space. This latest contest mirrored that exact nightmare scenario, featuring a lethargic offense where the rock felt like it was stuck in quicksand. The explosive, open-floor fast breaks that fueled her breathtaking second-quarter demolition of Senegal were completely wiped off the board. Consequently, her final numbers told a deeply tragic story. Producing a mere 8 points and 2 assists across 18 minutes is a stunning drop-off for a maestro who had just orchestrated 17 points and 12 dimes when granted proper freedom previously. Cyberspace erupted into a ruthless frenzy instantaneously, boiling over with an intense rage that had been simmering ever since Clark was relegated to the second unit during her national team debut. Repeating that exact same rotational insult for the second matchup acted like gasoline poured directly onto a raging bonfire of discontent. The core thesis behind this outrage is incredibly straightforward and impossible to misunderstand. Unleash Clark to dictate the tempo and orchestrate the flow, and the entire squad instantly transforms into an unstoppable, highly efficient scoring machine. They become a thrilling, electric spectacle, but shackle her to the bench, and you witness the excruciatingly dull disaster that unfolded against Puerto Rico. What should have stood as a dominant, 43-point declaration of global supremacy devolved into endless debates over why the deadliest initiator on the roster was rotting away as a backup, playing 18 measly minutes. The internet collectively points to that majestic 17-12 showing against Senegal because it serves as the ultimate, undeniable proof of concept. Hand her the keys to the offense, let her push the throttle to the absolute limit, and watch her expertly dissect backpedaling defenders to feed wide-open shooters in the blink of an eye. That exact blueprint birthed an offensive avalanche so spectacular that Coach Lawson openly celebrated that specific lineup synergy during the media scrum. Yet, chain her to an 18-minute limit with disjointed rotations, and you end up with a 43-point victory that felt as joyous as a grueling, mandatory early morning practice drill. A wildly fascinating dynamic involving Angel Reese continuously dominated the post-game chatter among keen-eyed observers. Whenever Reese ripped the ball down off the defensive glass, you could consistently spot Clark sprinting down the hardwood like a gazelle, screaming for the deep outlet feed. Those golden flashes, the perfect chance to weaponize a defensive stand into a lethal fast break before the opposition could blink, were completely ignored, as the rock never found Clark's waiting hands. Instead, Reese opted for safer, alternate targets, or simply walked it up the court herself, strangling the offensive momentum before it ever drew its first breath. This agonizing cycle of a wide-open Clark being completely bypassed by the ball handler, resulting in the tragic death of countless fast breaks, perfectly illustrates the dismal reality hidden within the box score. Ending the night with 8 points and 2 dimes is never the outcome when your generational guard is fed in stride. Rather, it is the grim consequence of freezing her out of the offense. We are not just talking about some meaningless exhibition match. The high-stakes reality of this entire tournament turns every single roster choice into a potential disaster. Welcome to the brutal gauntlet of the FIBA Women's World Cup qualifiers, where these athletes are surviving 5 relentless battles across 7 exhausting days. On paper, those opening clashes against Senegal and Puerto Rico were supposed to be the absolute cakewalks of the schedule. But looming in the shadows are European titans like Italy and Spain, and that grueling, night-after-night warfare is going to violently expose this squad's shaky chemistry and baffling rotations against ruthless defenders who will devour that sluggish offense we suffered through against Puerto Rico. Unless the people holding the clipboards wake up and make drastic, immediate changes before stepping onto the hardwood against Italy. The outrage surrounding Caitlin Clark being kept on a leash is going to erupt into a deafening roar, because those European giants are absolutely nothing like Senegal or Puerto Rico. We are talking about brilliantly orchestrated, violently physical international powerhouses packed with veterans who know exactly how to slaughter a gifted but completely chaotic opposing offense. Those agonizingly stagnant half-court sets that Puerto Rico miraculously failed to capitalize on? They will turn into sudden death sentences the moment we face a hyper-disciplined elite defensive unit. The roaring demand to unleash Caitlin Clark from the opening tip-off isn't some complex basketball algebra. Just look at the tape. When they actually let her command the floor with absolute freedom, the entire offense caught fire, transforming the squad into an unstoppable juggernaut that delivered absolute poetry in motion instead of an ugly victory. Yet, when they threw a straitjacket on her, capping her at 18 measly minutes without a defined rhythm, Team USA somehow demolished their opponent by 40 points, while simultaneously looking utterly miserable on the court. These two starkly contrasting realities are screaming a single, undeniable truth at the top of their lungs. Following the opening tip of Game 1, Coach Lawson stood at the podium and claimed she was simply hunting for answers, insisting the starters would shuffle while she searched for the perfect on-court alchemy. But let's be entirely honest. The truth was already glaringly obvious long before she even faced the flashing cameras. That electric second-quarter run with Clark running the show was universally recognized as the absolute golden ticket. Yet somehow, the opening buzzer of Game 2 echoed through the arena with a totally bizarre lineup, while the biggest star in the building rotted on the pine. Seriously, what invisible mysteries are we still pretending to uncover here? Think back to those legendary American men's Olympic squads, the mythical dream teams fueled by the sheer aura of Michael Jordan, the legendary Kobe Bryant, and LeBron James. Those era-defining titans were never shoved to the sidelines for 42 out of 60 minutes just to force-feed an offense through lesser talents who couldn't carry their sneakers. Those iconic empires were constructed directly upon the shoulders of their absolute best weapons, and the starting five proudly broadcasted that dominance to the globe. The gold medals proved that philosophy worked flawlessly, and right now, this current American squad is hoarding the single most dangerous floor general in the entire women's game. She put on an absolute masterclass in Game 1, and even flashed that same terrifying brilliance during a criminally brief 18-minute cameo in Game 2. Now, the Italian showdown looms like a storm cloud. The sheer level of hostility is about to skyrocket, meaning the room for error with those lethargic, broken, offensive schemes is evaporating into thin air. The millions watching at home aren't blind to the obvious solution, and the cold, hard statistics certainly aren't hiding the key to victory either. The absolute only thing shrouded in delusion right now is the mind-boggling coaching strategy that glued their greatest asset to the bench for most of a contest where they annihilated the enemy by 40 points, yet still played like they were drowning in quicksand. Take off the chains, start Clark, unleash her full fury, and hand her the ultimate green light to push the tempo and recreate that jaw-dropping 17-point, 12-assist masterpiece we saw against Senegal. That clash with Italy is charging at us like a freight train, and this tired excuse of claiming to be in an experimental phase has officially reached its expiration date. The American squad walked away with a 40-point blowout, yet inexplicably left the entire basketball world cringing at the sheer ugliness of their performance. Our generational phenom was suffocated into 18 minutes, barely scraping together 8 points and 2 dimes, the exact same killer who orchestrated a brilliant 17 and 12 performance when finally allowed to breathe just one night prior. The Italians are stepping onto the battlefield next, and the sheer brutality of this tournament is only ramping up if you want to catch every explosive twist in this unfolding saga. Smash that like button and subscribe right now.